Good morning, sir.
Good morning, Salvan.
Yes, sir. Can you hear us, sir?
Yes, Salvan, I can hear you.
Okay, sir. Okay. Sir, shall we start now? Or wait for
Yes,
3-4
Salvan,
minutes?
yeah, we still have some time, yeah? 3-4
Yeah.
minutes.
So, okay. Fine, sir.
Yeah.
A very good morning to you all. Am I audible to everyone?
Yes.
Okay. Very good morning to you all. I welcome you all for Wildlife Week Celebration 2020. As you all know that Ministry is celebrating Wildlife Week from 2nd October to 8th October to promote preservation of flora and fauna in the country. The ministry is organizing webinar or screening movies and live streaming of national park and zoos, etc. Yesterday we had an excellent webinar on bird conservation in India, and today our theme is reptiles and amphibians in India. So, as we all know that herpetofauna in the country is one of the understudied taxa when compared to the other species in other taxa in India. And the herpetofauna mostly they live in variety of habitats, but it's one of the indicator of the healthy ecosystem. So we are happy that today we have a theme on reptiles and amphibians. So today we have 4 special talks, and each talk will have a 15 to 20 minutes, and I would request all the presenters to stick with the timing so that we can finish it up on time. And let me introduce our first speaker, Dr. Abhijit Das. Dr. Abhijit Das is a faculty of Wildlife Institute of India, and he primarily works on biography and conservation of amphibians and reptiles. He has been working on diversity and distribution of herpetofauna, especially in northeastern India. He has done many inventory studies and documented many species in northeastern India. So now I would request Dr. Abhijit Das to present his talk on conservation of reptiles and amphibians in India. Over to Abhijit Das, please.
Thank you, Dr. Selvan. Thank you so much for introducing me. And I will start with sharing my screen. If you can see that, uh, if you can see my screen, please share. If you can see that, if you can see my screen, please share. If you can see that, if you can see my screen, please share. If you can see that, if you can see my screen, please share. If you can see that, if you can see my screen, please share. If you can see that, if you can see my screen, please share. Uh, can you see my screen, Dr. Shelvan?
Yeah, please. It's visible.
Okay. Thank you. And I really appreciate this inclusive approach of MOEFCC for generating awareness, even for a group of animal which are lesser known. So, as yesterday we have seen some very nice talks, and those talks are probably little different from what I'm going to present, because yesterday's talks were mostly conservation actions, but because the group of animal that we are dealing with are very less known, so my talk will be mostly based on conservation opportunities. So that's the difference between these two. So as you all know, we have a good diversity of reptiles and amphibians, and this particular group is actually a connecting link between our aquatic and terrestrial system. Okay, so we amphibians and reptiles together, called as herpetofauna, makes a significant portion of our native biodiversity. So what is the number that we are talking about? So in globally, we are talking about a group of animal which has some 20,000 species. And in our country, we are talking about a group of animal which is almost like 1,000 species, of which almost 6,000 plus species are reptiles, and 400 species are amphibians, Sicilians, and salamanders. So one thing that very makes them very special is the way they maintain their body temperature. That is, they are ectothermic animals. They are dependent on external light source for their daily activities, and we must appreciate their life in extremely low energy demand. That means they can be in lockdown every year without much of trouble. Okay, the other important aspect is that because they are connected to both aquatic and terrestrial system, they are key for ecosystem functioning that we see around us, right? So when we talk about conservation, I mean, you all probably agree with me for the fact that we need this information, as I have listed these 5 points which are crucial for conservation. We need to know how much diversity we have. We need to know the distribution of the species. We need to know the population of the species before we intervene, and we also need to know ecology and threats. And if you also probably have the idea that we have saved so many of our species, particularly mammals, and we have first of all generated all this information and then we have saved. But I give you an example from northeastern hills, one of the largest species of tortoise. So this is a large growing species having a long generation time. We probably have the historical range of the species, which is only restricted to south of river Brahmaputra. We have no idea about the population of the species as of now. The ecology of the species, although, is very interesting because it is one of those third species of reptile of our country which makes a mound nest. Okay, the other two being king cobra and saltwater crocodile, but this species also makes a mound nest. But this kind of informations or nesting habitats are completely lacking for our country. And because it is large bodied and long lived animal, the threats from over exploitation actually makes it particularly vulnerable. And there was an 50% decline in the population in last 10 years, makes it an endangered species. So that's what the information about a giant tortoise. And this is similar to even the largest soft-shell turtle of our peninsular India, called Lethe's soft-shell turtle, and the Cantor soft-shell turtle, which may actually grow up to 100 kilogram weight. But we just know such a large animal from just 20 locality records from southern India. So that's the problem in conservation of this species. Most of the species are so-called as covered species. Now, My talk will be mostly around these 5 points. So, how much we know about our diversity? Although we have generated some informations from our protected areas, but still we have a long way to go. Most of our protected areas still do not have reliable list of species that are incorporated in our management plan. So there is one intervention we need to do, because we cannot conserve if we do not know about those species, right? So, but it's not about only the checklist and the faunal list that we need to know. What about the amazing diversity they have in their reproductive biology? For example, every frog species that we have in our country, some 400 species, has a unique call pattern. And they have marked sexual dimorphism. The female is quite different from the male, and the way they breed, the amplexus formation, and way they lay their eggs in different kind of places, like whether it is a moist leaves or on the ground or under the rocks, so we call as oviposition sites. So all this varies. So we cannot conserve a species without knowing where they lay eggs and what is their reproductive behavior that they show. But the challenge is that, unlike many other species, if we want to know the functional diversity of this species, which is essential for their conservation, we need to go to forest in the night time to see them. So there is something different that we have to do to save this species, and know better, know more about them. What about distribution? How much are we know about whether they are rare or they are common? Okay, some species, if you see in IUCN list, you will see that they are distributed throughout our country, what we call as least concerned species, right? As you see a map of a species which is everywhere in our country. Now, and there are a bunch of species which you come across in IUCN red list. They are listed as data deficient species. So we have this two dilemma of either a very common species or data deficient species, and in between there is hardly anything. So that's the problem in conservation. Now, is this distribution that is so large in India is correct? Probably not, because that may be a result of faulty taxonomy. As we have shown in this case of frog, a little tiny 2 centimeter frog called Microhyla ornata. So as the species was known to be distributed everywhere in our India, thus it's considered as a least concerned species. But when we see the DNA profiling of the species across India, then we have found that actually Microhyla ornata species is only restricted to southern part of our country. And the other population which was perceived as Microhyla ornata are consisting of another 3 species which is found in our country. So now actually the range of the species is reduced to a very small geographical area, makes it much more vulnerable to local extinction and events, right? So that's what is we need to do. We need to have more in-depth information, a closer look, to know that what is the actual distribution of the species. Now, we can take this example of a larger species like this yellow tortoise or a sal forest tortoise, again a species having a very long generation time and a very small clutch size. The species has a very wide distribution range, starting from Southeast Asia all the way to Tarai region of our Uttarakhand, and it goes up to Odisha also. Now, such a huge range, probably we can just say that, okay, the species may have such a huge range. But across the range, when we mapped its distribution and modeled with the threats it faces across its range, for example, the fire or the distribution outside protected area, we have found that probably this critically endangered species is population of this is highly fragmented, and the fragmented population is again threatened from threats like fire, and impacts like forest fire can impact the species more because they cannot run, they move really slow. So these are certain things that we have to decide, and we need to know the current distribution of the species and not rely on the old distributions, so that we also arrest the threat of the species across their geographical range. The third point that we need to know about conservation is the population or abundance of the species. But do we have information about this? Again, population information is hardly available for most of our reptiles and amphibian species. Now, with the help of Ministry of Environment and Forest and Climate Change and Department of Science and Technology, WII has generated some baseline information from Kalakat Mundanthurai Tiger Reserve and Andaman and Nicobar Islands. So what is the information? The information is that the leaf litter herpetofauna, what is the abundance of leaf litter herpetofauna across those landscape? And it has been found that the distribution of this leaf litter herpetofauna across across the forest ecosystem varies, and they are highly patchy in their distribution. Now, we need to know such abundance information because any kinds of canopy opening or habitat loss actually changes the soil moisture. And if there is a change in soil moisture, there will be decline in the moisture dependent species such as reptiles and amphibians. So amphibians and reptiles can be used as a surrogate to understand the moisture regime in our tropical forest. I give you another example, and sometime we are in a better position to know the population of a species. I will take you to the Himalayan streams, and these streams are very, very highly threatened because of rock extraction, because of small check dam construction, because a stream can be very easily modified. Okay, now in these streams, although it looks like a linear habitat, but there are various micro habitats available. For example, the water dancing down calls refill, the water where there is less movement of water, that is called pool, the water with slow flow is called run, and there are cascade section also. Now these are microhabitats available, and those microhabitats are being occupied by special species which are only adapted to such kind of habitat. For example, I show you this photograph of a beautiful stream frog or a cascade frog, which is only adapted to live a life in the cascade section of the stream, and it has morphological adaptations also. For example, it is large disc on its fingers so that it can cling on the slippery rocks of the stream. Now, if someone remove or change the flow of the stream, this frog will directly get impacted. Now, how we will know the impact? Now, this frog provides us a very good opportunity because this frog has unique spots on its body. So we have photographed the frog from distance and use those photographs to understand the population of the species using softwares, so that we can come up with a abundance estimate. So that's what we have done. And so we also need, this method is so easy that even citizen science approach can be applied to understand the population of our stream frogs. But the only point is that the frog or the species that we are doing need to have some unique body marking to understand, to do this. So that is also possible because there are at least more than 100 species of amphibians which are represent some special habitats, have unique body pattern. What is about ecology? Now, this is probably the poorest information that we have. We do not know species ecology much. We also need to know how far a species move to save a species. And because these reptiles and amphibians are dependent on external heat source, we need to know their thermal ecology also. For example, this very interesting lizard, the only species found in our country which lives in water, the only water skink of India. This species lives in the narrow, slow, first order streams of Northeast India, right? But we forget about the ecology of the species. We hardly even know that the species, whether it lays eggs or the species even give live birth to its offspring. So that information is also lacking. So that's what is I mean, water skink is probably the representative of most of the species of herpetofauna in our country. So we have to promote basic research in this group of animals. We have also can show this example of a frog which only lives in the pool section of the stream. So this particular frog does not have disc, so it only can live in the pool section. It's a large Himalayan torrent frog. So we have used transmitters to see how much that frog move, and we have come out with a very interesting information that this particular stream frog hardly moves away from the stream. If you see this graph, the movement is always restricted to the stream section. So if there is a modification of the stream, I mean, this is a species which will be impacted because this species cannot use the terrestrial zone associated with the stream for its use. It has to move only along the stream. So these kind of informations are important for us before any kind of intervention we made in our management aspect. We have used infrared gun to understand the body temperature regime of the stream frogs of eastern Himalaya, for example, Sikkim Himalaya. So we have used this infrared gun on each frog that we meet in forested area, and we found in very interesting information that most of the Himalayan stream frogs had a very, very narrow range of body temperature which is within 15 to 20 degrees centigrade. So any perturbation or any change in the morphology or the temperature regime of the stream or the forest ecosystem will directly impact them because they have a very narrow range of temperature, and that is much when it compared to a wide ranging species like common toad, the temperature range is really, really high. So this kind of narrow range of temperature also restrict them to breed at a very, very specific and particular time of the year. So they are highly seasonal in their activity also. So we need such kind of information to save the species because they are dependent on thermal biology. So the fifth point and probably the last group of conservation action that we need are that we need to identify the threats they are facing. So do we have enough information about that? And for when we talk about threat, I do not want to deviate from the classical conservation biology principle of small population paradigm and declining population paradigm, right? So in small population paradigm, we hardly can do anything now because they have already became very, very small in their population. And we now what we need to do is we have to address inbreeding, we have to maintain the meta-population dynamics. But we can do a lot of things while there is a declining population paradigm like habitat loss, overexploitation, and invasive species like cats and dogs, which are killing our herpetofauna nowadays. And invasive species which we have introduced in place like Andaman and Nicobar Island, bullfrogs are eating most of our other frogs. So is there any small population exist? Yes, probably we have already reached to few species like Batagur kachuga and Batagur baska. These are the turtle species probably need our attention from the small population paradigm perspective, because in this species there is already a crash in population and they are only now restricted to one or two pockets. So what is the reason for such drastic decline? Probably because this species has a very, very large female body size, and there is a selective removal of female animals from the population, which actually probably responsible for crash in the population, because females are the most important part of the population. So Batagur baska, Batagur kachuga, or even our Gharial probably reached small population paradigm, and we have to do genetic experiments to save this. But there are other species, for example, the 4 species of monitor lizard that actually extremely overexploited species across its geographical range, and because they live in outside our protected area, even impacts are more. But with more and more awareness, now forest department is rescuing, and also the forest department sizing a lot of these animals. Okay, but the problem then arises that where do we release them? Do we know that from where those animals have originated so that we can release in their native place? So that is probably not possible. So now we even need as options like genetic library, so that whenever there is a seizure, we can match the DNA profile of those population, and then we can target the animals in their respective area, geographical or native range. So that is something is a very important for overexploited species. With the growing awareness, there is more and more interventions are happening. We are rescuing hundreds and hundreds of snakes every day, and those snakes were released also. But then the question arises that where we are releasing, what is the home range of a snake, and the way we are handling snake, is it correct? So that is something we have to take a call. It's time probably that we have to develop SOPs, so that what we do it correctly. For example, there are nowadays we are quite actively catching snakes with many tools. Like if you see this tongue, in both these cases they are non-venomous snake. But when you handle a snake, active snake, with a tool like a tongue, that it will actually destroy the bone, or it will create a lot of internal injury, which will be obvious because it is a which will not be obvious because it is a reptile species. So what we need to do is that we have to inculcate proper handling techniques, so that the sincere effort that we are paying should not go in vain, so that we after we release the snake, it should survive in the wild. And we should also aware people that to avoid accident, we should only handle snake properly. So we have to promote proper equipments for handling snake, and that's where is one of the very big area that we have to achieve. And that's where probably we can also get more connection with our community. uh, Reptiles and amphibians are the most frequently killed animals on our road, and it is almost proved everywhere they are dying. So we actually have only very preliminary information, and mostly they are also lacking in many areas. So why they die? Because they are thigmotherms, because they take the surface heat in the night time. They come on the road and they sit on the metal surface and take the heat. So that's why we call they are thigmotherms. Also, reptiles have a very distinct movement pattern, which consists of juveniles which disperse and adults that migrate. Okay, so for example, female have to go or move to lay eggs. Male has to move a lot to find a mate, and juvenile has to move because they have to disperse. So all these different phase of movements makes them particularly vulnerable to road segments that are passing through our protected area. So we have to take extreme cognizance to save this species, because their movement is highly seasonal. So if we can intervene at a very seasonal time, we can save millions of life. And sometimes the impacts are located far away from what we visualize. So we have to be careful regarding this, so that we use proper mitigation measure for our specialized animal, which are actually lesser known. So what are way ahead? And this is probably my last slide. So the way ahead for us is that we have to identify our critical habitats. So for example, may have a very large protected area, maybe a tiger reserve, but within the tiger reserve there may be some very crucial microhabitat which we have to identify and put it in our management plan, so that we can save those spatial species occupying those spatial niches. Okay, for example, a small basking site for a turtle is much more important for the whole turtle population of an area, or the nesting place of king cobra will be much more important for generating awareness surrounding the area, or even protecting it from predators like dogs and cats and many other issues. Or even a very small forest stream that is slow flowing, we need to identify that, because that may hold the most of the breeding site of amphibians of that area. So critical habitat identification is a key. We have to have our conservation actions which need to be informed. For example, if we are intervening, say we are making a small check dam in our stream, we need to know, is there any impact happening on the breeding biology of some species? So we have to have an informed action. And with the last point, I finished this talk saying that for conservation of reptiles and amphibians, we have to come back to ecosystem approach rather than a landscape approach. Although landscape approach is very, very important for larger animal conservation, but it is the ecosystem where these animals evolved. And to save those ecosystems, we have to know where they live. So that's where is my take, that we have to come back to our ecosystem level approach and know more and generate more information to save this species. Thank you so much, Dr. Salvan.
Thank you, Dr. Abhijit. In fact, it is a wonderful presentation. It's a blend with ecology and conservation of the species. And thank you. And is there any question from audience? If you don't have any question, we can move on to next presenter. Okay, Dr. Abhijit, I just wanted to ask you, since you have been working in Eastern Himalaya, is there
Yes.
any altitudinal migration in the reptiles and amphibian species like birds?
Okay, Dr. Selva, it's very interesting question. As you probably also know, recently Sikkim University is working very hard on the elevational distribution pattern, and they have found that there is a mid elevation peak, almost like birds, in case of amphibians and reptiles also. So it is actually the mid elevation where most of the species from both the region are actually coming and meeting, and it is the mid elevation which actually holds most of the unique species diversity also. So although there is not migration per se, because these animals can just go hibernate during winter season, but it is the native diversity which matters more for us.
Thank you, Dr. Abhijit.
Yes.
I think there is no question. Then we'll move on to next presenters. So our next presenter is Dr. Samir Kumar Sinha, who is associate with the Wildlife Trust of India for the last 17 years, and is currently head of conservation of WTI. He has steered many conservation projects in WTI, and one of them is Gharial recovery project. So today he will be talking about Gharial conservation in Bihar. Over to Dr. Samir Sinha, please.
Thank you, Dr. Selvan. Am I audible?
Yeah, you are. Okay, you are sharing?
Yeah, I'll do that.
Okay, done. Okay, thank you. Not yet.
Okay, it will take some.
Yeah. Now it is visible.
Okay.
Please enlarge your PPT.
Yeah. So, Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change for inviting me in this webinar, and thank you, Dr. Selvan, for introducing me. Basically, my presentation is on a conservation action project in a state, in the northern Indian state of which was not known for Gharial per se. It is known for other aquatic fauna like Gangetic, the dolphin, and then turtles. But Gharial was new to this area, especially when we talk about conservation. So I'll be presenting a case study conservation of this species. This project is of Bihar Forest Department and Wildlife Trust of India. We have been doing it together since 2014, and Funding support also comes from IDWH project, IDWH scheme of Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change. Other than that, we also get a small grants to continue our activities from other donors like Los Angeles Zoo and Botanical Garden. So here is the outline of my presentation. In few slides, I'll be discussing about the status of Gharial, and then I'll talk about the journey of this species conservation in Bihar, and lastly, what are the conservation challenges and the way forward for conservation of this species in general, and particularly in the stretch of in the rivers of the state of Bihar. You all know that there are three families in Crocodilia, that is alligator, crocodiles, and Gavialidae. So Gavialidae is a single genus family with one genus, that is Gharial, Gavialis gangeticus, and it is endemic to Indian subcontinent, primarily found in Indus, Ganga, Brahmaputra, Mahanadi river systems of India. During 2006-7, it was an alarm for the scientists, for the herpetologists and the crocodilian experts, when they recorded 98% decline in population in comparison to 1946. So this 98% decline in population of the total population of Gharial, and 58% decline in adult Gharial in less than 10-year time. So due to these two key factors, other than shrinkage of distribution range, the species uh, designated as critically endangered in 2007 as per the IUCN Red List of Threatened Species. Again, the species status was assessed in 2017, and the species is still under critically endangered category. But in 2017 Red List assessment, some good things come out. Like the population trend shows that now its population is increasing. There are increase in number of mature individuals as well. So currently the estimate says that there are 300 to 900 Gharial, and the median figure is 650, which was less than 250 adult individual in when the 2007 assessment was done. But interestingly, during this period, during 2007 and 17, the range has shrunk further. Now, the Gharial is limited only to 14 widely spaced locations in India, out of which 6 are major in terms of number, maybe 100 individual or around 100 individual, and presence of breeding Gharials. Apart from that, there are 8 minor subpopulations, and there were 6, actually 5 breeding sites recorded in the assessment, but after that assessment, which was based on the data till 2017, 2 more sites have been confirmed as a breeding site for the Gharial. One is Babai River, and the other this year nests were recorded in Jamuna River as well, and has gone extinct from Bhutan, Myanmar, and Pakistan, where it was present in abundance. So now I'll come to the conservation initiative in Gharial in Bihar. So in Bihar, the river enters in India at this point, you can see it looks like this. A barrage has been constructed across the river to regulate the flow, and water is channelized for irrigation and hydropower generation. Interestingly, most of you might be knowing, or if you don't know, it is the new information for you that Gharial lakes from Narayani river system were used to head start the Gharial conservation program in India in late 70s. So the source of eggs were Narayani river system. Uh, as far as conservation initiatives in the Gandak River is concerned, uh, in fact, in 1976, when there was a project of FAO and HR Bustard was working in our country, a crocodile farming project was conceptualized in this area, especially near the Gandak River. It was meant for both for marsh crocodile and Gharial as well. you also find some descriptions in old literature. You must have, most of you have gone through a very famous book written by late Sri S.P. Sahi. He was the then Chief Wildlife Warden of Bihar. In his Backs to the Wall, the saga of wildlife in Bihar, he writes a few points about the Gharial presence and the morphology of Gharial that he encountered in the Gandak River. It is mentioned in that book. Very scanty information were available on the Gharial population that existed in the Gandak River. The information were limited only for a few tens of kilometers from the barrage where it enters in India. From 1977 onward, you can say that no conservation attention was paid on this species till 2010. So there was a big black hole during these 2-3 decades. When we talk about actions, basically it started in 2010. So after 2010, first survey was done in the rivers for assessment of population status of gharial and other aquatic fauna like Ganges River dolphin and otters. It was a multi-species, multi-organizational survey in which MCBT, Gharial Conservation Alliance, the WWF India, Wildlife Trust of India, Bihar Forest Department, they all came together, and for the first time, a complete survey was done in Indian stretch right from Valmiki Nagar, where it enters in India, up to its confluence with the Ganga opposite Patna. So it was about 24 kilometer long river stretch, which was surveyed for the first time. In 2014, the Bihar Forest Department and Wildlife Trust of India started a linking project. Basically, it was to release ex situ gharial population from Patna Zoo to the in situ site in the Gandak River. From 2016 onward, we have been monitoring the population, and we have also started nest protection because we got the evidences of nests in 2015 itself. But the physical nests were located only in 2016. And in 2016, it was confirmed that the Gandak River holds a breeding population of Gharial. And after that, the legal protection has been taken, measures have been taken to protect the habitat legally by notifying it as a protected area. So post 2010, there are, if you divide the entire, entire activity, you can divide it in 4 major sections. The 2010 survey, the multi-organizational survey, it found that there is a relict population of gharial, and direct sighting and indirect signs of the species resulted into inference that there are less than or about 15 gharials are present in the river system. But the survey came up with a finding that there are habitats which are suitable for the species, and the survey recommended the population strengthening because the number of tens or 15s of gharial in a river like Gandak River, which is about 320 kilometer plus, it is not going to be a viable population. So one of the major recommendations was to strengthen the population of the species in the river system. After that, the State Board for Wildlife recommended restocking of gharial in 2002. So in 2002, basically, policy decision was taken to introduce to strengthen the gharial in the Gandak River system. The gharial which were bred at Patna Zoo were suggested to restock the Gandak population. And in 2014, Bihar Forest Department and Wildlife Trust of India initiated a project on this restocking, and our impact on post-release monitoring. A captive bred stock of the gharial was available in Patna Zoo. Basically, in 2003-4, the captive breeding of gharial was started in Patna. So, by the time the restocking project was conceptualized, there were enough number of sub-adult gharial which were suitable to be released in the Gandak were already there as a release stock. At the same time, the same individual were supposed to be released in the Gandak River, because by the time in these 10 years, we found a suitable habitat for linking this ex situ conservation effort to an ex situ conservation measure. So parallelly, 2 actions were taken. was all there were 100 plus sub-adult gharials in Patna Zoo. So not all were supposed to be released. So all we segregated the animals in the Patna Zoo. They were kept in isolation. They were acclimatized by giving live fish. Health screening was done. Sexing was done. So all these things happened in Patna Zoo, and at the same time, we surveyed the entire river for selection of release site. Not the entire river, especially 15 to 50 to 60 kilometer of the river stretch was surveyed. And I must inform you that when the river enters in India, on the left bank of the river, for about 40 kilometers, there is a forest range of Valmiki Tiger Reserve. Though the river is not a part of the sanctuary or the tiger reserve, but it forms the boundary of the tiger reserve. So the habitat is more or less protected because there is no human intervention on the left bank of the river. So we conducted survey in this protected stretch to identify the sites where the gharial could be released. We released 30 gharials, of which 3 were adult, 3 were males, and 27 were females. 2 of them were satellite tagged, and 4 of them were VHF tagged. And all gharials were marked by cutting the tail scutes in a unique manner, so that it helps us monitoring the species after releasing the river system. So post-release monitoring using satellite telemetry, VHF tagged gharials were also monitored, identified the basking sites of river, and at the same time we also monitored the entire 320-kilometer length of the river to see how long the released gharials are getting dispersed in the Gandak river. So this effort is still going on. So monitoring did some good good findings in terms of dispersal of the species. One female which was satellite tagged, it moved up to 420 kilometers to other river Son, which is a southern tributary of the Ganga. So in general, in wild, gharials have been recorded to disperse for 200 kilometer and then come back to their main area, native area. But this individual, this female, went up to 420 kilometer. One, it crossed the barrage, so it went upstream of the release site. It crossed the barrage and went to Nepal, and again after a few weeks, it came back to the lower part of the barrage, downstream of the barrage, and 18 out of 30 released gharial were sighted dead in the initial 1 year. Even last year in 2019 and 2020, we are recording the released gharial settled in the Gandak river system. Interestingly, one gharial moved approximately 1,000 kilometers from the release site. It went to Mahananda River. This gharial was neither a satellite tag nor a VHF tag, but it could be identified only due to pattern of tail scute cut that we did for marking the gharial. So you can see this gharial started from here, the release site, and we recorded it here in February 2015, and in October 3rd in the same year, it was captured here in Mahananda River system, which is approximately 1,000 kilometer. It was captured and then it was transferred to a local in situ facility, ex situ enclosure in West Bengal, the Sikbil. And this gharial was identified due to another feature. While it was crossing the barrage, perhaps its lower snout was damaged. Lower seat, it was a portion of it was broken, so we could identify the gharial very easily. We also found that the gharial released during our program, they are sharing space with the wild individuals. Here you can see this is the tail scute cut gharial which was released under the program. It was basking with a gharial which was wild in origin. So 2016 onward, we focused on monitoring of the gharial. Even in 2000, we conducted one survey to record the change in population structure and monitor the dispersal and survival of our released individual. So we have been doing annual surveys since 2015. Recorded gharial nest. 6 nests were located at one site, that is it was hardly a 10 meter or 10 to 15 meter wide sand bank. where we recorded 6 Gharial nests, and that was the first breeding record documented in the Gandak River. Though the locals, they informed us that Gharial keeps on breeding, they had detected nests in earlier years also, but it was not documented scientifically. So for the first time in 2016, the Gandak became the fourth breeding site of. And since the river is controlled, the river flow is controlled by a barrage, it is a regulated river. So many a time, or I'll say most of the time, they release water at the end of March or the first week of April, and that is the time when gharials nest on the sandbanks. And due to sudden release of water, erosion gets started, and it basically threatens the nesting sites. Most of the time, the nests are eroded. So the main emphasis of our work is to protect those nests which are facing the threat of erosion. You can see here in the lower left photograph, one eroded nest is there, eggs are there. So they are prone to erosion, and we try them in situ, shift them in situ by creating temporary hatchery. And after completion of incubation period, our biologist he assists in hatching, and the gharials are released in areas where from where we have collected the eggs. This photograph is of this year, 2020. You can see these hatchlings are from the in situ hatchery, and the mother gharial, she came there, and all the hatchlings were released. And now after that, all these hatchlings, they accompanied the mother, and the babies were taken care by the parent. Uh, in the meantime, we were also monitoring the population of gharial in the river when we were doing the 320-kilometer long survey. Interestingly, one survey was done by third party Tarun and associates in 2014 March. In 2014, they recorded 50 gharials, out of which some 4% were the released individual from Nepal and India. So I'll tell you that in Nepal, the captive gharial or captive reared gharial are released from 1981 onward. So there is a population which is released by Nepalese authorities. So in 2014 survey, the third party found 50 gharials. In 2015, our team recorded 54 gharial. In 2017, it went up to 119. And 2018 onward, we are doing 2 surveys in a year. So 144 and 166 in 2019, 204, 185. And this year, we could do only 1 survey due to COVID lockdown. And this year, we recorded 259 gharial in the Gandak River system. You can see the main change here in the population structure is due to, means the breeding is contributing to increase in population. The number of adults or the proportion of adults is more or less same across these 5-6 years. The breeding population we have identified 4 breeding sites where congregation takes place in the month of January, February. You can see adult male and adult female gharial, and 2016 onward, you can see the different statistics related to breeding. So in 2016, there were only 2 breeding congregations. After that, this year we recorded 3 breeding congregations. In 2017, we could not detect any nest due to the fact that the barrage released water in the last week of March, and all the sandbanks were eroded, and gharial could not nest on those sandbanks. There were no suitable sites available for the species for nesting. So we have been protecting these nests. So based on gharial congregation, number of adult gharials present, and overall population, you can see this heat maps have been prepared. Heat map has been prepared, and you can find the hot spots in the river system where gharials are congregating, mainly congregating. So based on these input, the State Board for Wildlife recommended to declare a stretch of about 140 kilometers as a Gandak River Conservation Reserve. So it is 140 kilometers where you will find the key habitat, all breeding sites and key basking sites, and the major population, I would say about 80% or 85% population of gharial is present in this 140-kilometer stretch. Downstream of this last point, there is lots of human disturbance and creek crossing is there, cultivation, bank cultivation, mid-channel cultivation is there. So gharials are not occupying that area too much. So in the same process, we have done community consultation, because our chief minister is very particular that whenever you are declaring any area as a protected area, you should get involved communities, you should get their consent. So you can see our field biologist and the forest department staff, they are holding meetings in all the villages. We till date we have covered 24 gram panchayats, and we are holding meeting even during this COVID, after this COVID lockdown. And fortunately, all the villagers, all the panchayats, they are agreed to notify this conservation reserve. So it is one of the key things that has happened during lockdown or post-COVID, post-lockdown period. What is the importance of gharial for conservation, gandak for gharial conservation, especially not only in India but globally? It forms the second largest subpopulation of gharial in its entire distribution range. The highest, obviously, is the Chambal River, where about 1,800 or 1,700 gharials are there. But with 259, it is not too high, but still it forms the second largest population of the species. And 7% of the adult gharial population is found in Gandak River. The Chambal River holds 77% of the adult gharial population, and the remaining population is found in other five major subpopulations. In Gandak River, gharial occupies 270 kilometers of the river length, which is 25% of the entire length of the 6 major gharial populations. These 6 major gharial populations are Katania Ghat, Chambal, your Corbett, Ramganga River, then Gandak River. So it is about 25% of entire river length of 6 major populations. And it is one of the 7 breeding sites globally. And it is a safe habitat for gharial drifting down from Narayani Rapti river system. While we conduct our survey, we often found the gharial released by Nepal. During the survey, we share the photographs with the concerned person in Nepal. And on an average, 1.5 to 2% of the population that we record in Gandak River, it belongs to the released individuals. In 2018-19, the UP Forest Department has also started releasing gharial in technical collaboration with Gharial Turtle Survival Alliance. So 2% to 2.5% constitute the released gharials of this total gharial population in the river. When we do the SWOT analysis of gharial conservation in the Gandak River system, the strengths are that there is low anthropogenic pressure, including fishing. If you compare the Gandak River with other river system, the fishing pressure is low. Might be due to less availability of fish due to altered river system. There is no point source of pollution along the river. You will not find any major city or any major industrial discharge also along the river in India. And the river is highly braided, so it provides safe habitat to many species. The grasslands are intact, so the naturalness or the natural the natural ecosystems of the river, not only the water channels or mid-channel islands, but the banks are also protected. The river faunal diversity is quite rich. There are 150 plus Ganges River dolphin. There are 3-4 species of turtles, about 70 species of winter birds, and local resident birds. They use the river system. Apart from that, wolf has also been recorded on the floodplain. Hog deer found space on the grassland, all grasslands along the river system. So these are the strengths of the Gandak and its associated floodplain ecosystem. But the weakness is that the river is highly regulated. As I said earlier, the water is released by a barrage at Valmiki Nagar. So there is fluctuation in river flow, which affects the gharial population and other faunal elements as well. And there was no conservation effort in the past. So almost, as I said, almost for 35 years, there was nothing, no record, no conservation action. Possibly, it is possible that during those periods, we have lost species and the population as well of Gharial and other aquatic fauna or the floodplain fauna. The opportunities are immense. It requires a transboundary cooperation with Nepal because there is connectivity in Nepal and Nepal part and Indian part of the river Gandak. There is only one barrage, but we have seen that Ghadials are moving upstream also. So it is not completely blocked. It is semi-permeable, you can say. So permeability is there. So and we often record the Ghadial released by Nepal in Indian sites. Currently, we inform them, and the Nepal released Ghadials are also going in the canals, which is associated with the barrage system. So we need to have a transboundary cooperation officially done between the two countries. Since Nepal is not a part of CMS, so we need to find out how well we can do this collaboration and cooperation with the adjoining the native country. And opportunity is to accord a status of protected area, especially this is in the process. 140-kilometer stretch or 150-kilometer stretch is quite rich in terms of flora and fauna. But the threats are alarming. The release of water from the barrage during nesting period, it is a major threat for Gharial per se. And even during this period, we have recorded that release in water, sudden release in water, or even a stoppage of water if when the gates are closed, there is discontinuity in water channel. So last year, a dolphin was also rescued by our team because the dolphin baby, it was almost a neonate, 75 centimeter long dolphin calf, dolphin neonate, was stranded in a small water pool in the river channel because water got receded after closure of the barrage. So such shocks are evident in the river system. And recently in 2015 and 15 or 16, the river has been notified as National Waterways 37. If I am sure it is not going to be operational because it might have been done due to political reasons, but river navigation other than the monsoon period. So if this waterway is on full swing, different infrastructure will be created. The river channel will be dredged out. So it will disturb the habitat of almost all the aquatic and species like Gharial. So it is these two are the major threats. Way forward for Gandak River is to ensure the optimal flow in the river during critical periods uh, by a river water discharge management strategy. For this, Bihar Forest Department is working with or is in talk with the Water Resources Department. The talks are on, and most likely in a couple of years we'll come out with some solution to this problem. And legal securement, it is also in the pipeline. Once it is declared as a conservation reserve, it will help protection and conservation of many species. And participatory management planning of for the conservation reserve is important because all along the villages, though they are not just on the bank of the river, they are about 1 kilometer or 2 kilometer away from the river bank, but still their influence is on the river system. So we need to have one management plan for the conservation reserve where participation of locals it must be ensured so that the concerns of the locals could be addressed through management interventions, and it will help in winning their confidence for conservation of aquatic fauna, especially Gharial. And it is important to create community institutions to make the process self-sustainable for conservation and protection of Gharial. Like in protected areas, we do have eco-development committees or joint forest management committees in forest areas. So we need to develop some mechanism for this when it is notified as a protected area. And safeguarding habitat against detrimental effects of navigational activity. Even if the government start navigation, we need to have some strong safeguard measures so that the river channel is not altered, the habitat is not altered much, which will have detrimental effects on Gharial and other aquatic fauna. This in other river systems also we have recorded Gharials. Like in Kosi River system, 2 or 3 individuals were recorded last year. Ghagra is a river where gharials have been recorded, but not within the administrative boundary of the state, but upstream to that particular upstream to the boundary of Bihar and Uttar Pradesh. We do have a good population of of gharial in Ghagra river. So we need to explore possibilities of repopulating other rivers in the state as well. Mahananda is another possibility which forms a boundary between West Bengal and Bihar. So there is another river, Mahananda, where we can think for repopulating the river system. And at national level, it is important to have a transboundary cooperation for monitoring and threat reduction. And importantly, we need to have a gharial recovery plan for different river basins like Ganga, Brahmaputra, Indus, and Mahanadi. Brahmaputra rivers studies have been done by, I think Abhijit was also there in that study. Uh, but we need to look at what are the possibilities and what could be the potential solution for recovery of this population in these distribution ranges where they were present. Population recovery in potential river with suitable habitat available. Still, there are rivers where population can be recovered through reintroduction measures. But how are we going to do that? That needs to be discussed in detail so that the failures could be avoided. Identification of all tributary population and keeping in place the protection and management. Still, there are several tributaries where gharial population is found, but these tributaries are not known, and gharials are facing different types of threats in the smaller tributaries. So we need to identify, we need to assess population, and uh, uh, at least we should ensure that it is these small populations are protected and management effort goes in. And protection against habitat destruction, detrimental fishing, and threats due to use of rivers as waterways. Habitat destruction, especially due to sand mining, which affects Gharial a lot. Sand mining and then boulder mining, barrage dams and barrages, we cannot revert all those things, but definitely through policy interventions, we can protect illegal sand mining and even legal sand mining in Gharial habitat areas. Detrimental fishing is also, especially the use of nets which are detrimental to gharial, needs to be use of such nets needs to be controlled so that the rivers are safe for gharial and other aquatic. Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity.
Well, thank you, Dr. Samir Sinha. In fact, this is a wonderful presentation on gharial conservation in Bihar. We are happy to know that gharial population is increasing and over the years and doing well. I think we can take few questions now. If there are any questions from audience. If there is no question, then we'll move on to our next presentation.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Salvan.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Samir Sinha. And our next presenter is Sri Amalan Nayak. Amalan Nayak is an Odisha Forest Service officer from batch 2007. Since then, he has been working on various conservation projects, especially on olive ridley sea turtles in Odisha. At present, he is working as a DFO Barampur and closely associated with olive ridley conservation in Rushikliya. So today he will be talking on olive ridley sea turtle conservation and management in Odisha coast. Over to Mr. Amalan Nayak. Amalan Nayak, please.
Good afternoon, Dr. Selvan. Am I audible? Hello. Good afternoon, Dr. Selvan. Am I audible?
Yes,
Are you sharing your presentation?
I will be sharing it.
Your voice is not clear, Mr. Amalan. Yeah.
Am I audible now? Am I audible?
You are not audible properly.
Achha. So is it audible now?
Yeah.
So welcome all. Now I will be sharing my presentation. So let's start the presentation. Thank you very much, Dr. Selvan. So this is regarding going on in the coast of Odisha in special reference to Rusikulya rookery, which happens to be one of the major rookeries after Bhitarkanika or Gahir Matha rookery. So in an introduction phase, I would like to tell that olive ridley turtle is having a wide range of distribution throughout the tropical warm waters of Pacific and Indian Oceans. The adult weighs at around 25 to 45 kg, where the males weigh less and the females are a bit heavy. Though it is also Schedule 1 under Wildlife Protection Act and vulnerable as per the IUCN list. As known, they travel a long way to nest in their favorite beaches or rookeries, you can say. It is believed that the baby turtle goes and breeds at the same place where it had taken birth. So it is a very unique thing. So I would like to tell that the eggs which they lay, the minimum clutch size is up to 120 in conical nests of about 1.5 foot. By digging through their hind flippers, they cover the same by ramming. And we have 3 such nesting grounds. One is Gahir Matha in Kendrapada district, one is Rusikulya in Barampur, and Devi in Puri. All the 3 places are the places where rivers join the. So this olive ridley start from the mid of October every year and continue up to means it starts from October for this season. It will start from October 2020 and will continue up to May 2021. So what are the major threats? The threats are the olive ridleys, they are hit by trawlers. There is strangulation and asphyxiation in fishing nets. There is injury. So there are a lot of challenges to come by traveling so long a distance, become alive. They come and give their eggs in the nesting beaches. Then after giving eggs, when the hatchlings emerge, they have a further challenge of beach erosion and submergence of nests. So these nests sometimes are destroyed by the sea waters when the beach erosion takes place. The next slide, I would like to point out that what actually is the schedule of operations in the mass nesting. The first, there is a profiling and its analysis. We get to know the GPS coordinates that we take and analyze whether the beach has eroded from the past or it has accreted. It is very, very important to know how much area exactly we have for the mass nesting. Sometimes it is seen that large amount of beach is eroded and accretion does not take place substantially. But however, in some years, it is seen that accretion takes place substantially and subsequently in the next year, there is a lot of erosion. So it's a dynamic thing. So we continue beach profiling even before the start of the nesting. But profiling is generally done starting from the month of November. Then we go for setting up of temporary camps and hatcheries, artificial hatcheries in the month of November. We go for sea patrolling to prevent illegal fishing and entry of vessels in the ban zone. Because if any trawlers or other vessels will enter for fishing from Andhra Pradesh side or any other side from, it will be very, very detrimental to the population of olive ridleys that are coming to lay eggs here. Then we go for creation of awareness among the fishermen and public from November to March. It is a continuous process. We go on making them aware and making their livelihoods stable, giving them alternate opportunities of livelihood, and we go on making them aware that they are most essential for the nesting and release of the hatchlings. Then we go, then in the month of November to January, we monitor the congregation and mating. The mating and congregation is generally, congregation happens in the month of November to December, and on December onwards, it starts mating. The mating continues up to the end of January, and in the month of February or March first week, they go for egg laying in the beaches. Then there is an extensive activity of beach cleaning, as mentioned in the 6th point. It starts from December to February, and it happens for a minimum of 4 times, using manual labor and mechanical machines sometimes. And the total length of the beach to be covered is around 5 kilometers, which is a very, very Herculean task. And we expedite the system of cleaning by using machines at times, by earth movers or something, when the beaches get a lot of waste from the various rivers. So it is very, very essential to clear the beaches from the debris that are deposited by the rivers in the mouth. Next, in the 7th point I have mentioned, there is a meeting with the police, district administration, ports, industries, etc., which are nearby, and they are located nearby, and they take a lot of interest in helping the forest department in conservation and management of the sea turtle exercise during nesting. This happens generally during December and January, because from the month of February onwards, there is a possible chance of nesting. So December and January are kept for meeting. Then starts the beach fencing and the segmentation of the beach. Now, why the fencing is required? Let me tell you that the major challenge here is that as regards Gahir Matha, it is a protected area, and people always fear the laws of the land act, and they do not venture into the protected area. If they venture by mistake, they are booked under the Wildlife Protection Act 1972. But however, in our area, it is a non-protected area. It is just a seashore as other seashores. So it's a major challenge to control public, control feral dogs, control jackals, control other predators. So what we do, we completely fence the beach, starting from the nesting ground in the northern side to the nesting ground in the southern side. So there's a complete fencing of 5 kilometers, as mentioned earlier. There's a complete fencing of 5 kilometers, and there is a segmentation of the beach also. In the segmentation of the beach, we prefer segments of 100 meters each time, because each of the segments will be 100 meters, and there will be 50 segments. 5,000 meter is the total length, divided by 100, it is divided by 50, it is 100 meter segment for each. Then comes the mass nesting. The mass nesting generally happens at the end of February or by March. It is a general tendency. Then mosquito net fencing is done after the hatchlings are arriving, because before the hatchlings emerge in the month of April. The mosquito net fencing is done because the light is a factor in which the hatchlings are quite attracted, and they go towards the light. So light is always on the landward side. On the seaward side, it is darkness, because the hatchlings will emerge mainly in night time. So what we do, we put mosquito fence close to the fence that is erected on the beach. That hexanet fence is erected on the beach, and on the downward side, we erect the mosquito net, so that the hatchlings will not go to the landward side. They will always go to the beach. Then comes the emergence of hatchlings, that is that is after about 45 to 60 days after nesting. It happens in the month of May or June. Nesting is around February or March, and this happens around May or June. Then I'll give you few insights of what happened in the last season. So in the last season, you can just see in the picture how the beach fencing is done and how we restrict the people from entering into the area. So there was an extensive cleaning of the beach with the help of implements and local manpower, because we took all possible measures to clean the beach so that no sharp object will be left on the beach, even not a strand of wood, or even not a straw. Even whatever we did with mechanical means to pick out all the nests from the beaches, because nests always strangulate the leg portion of the or the flippers of the olive ridleys. So massive cleaning was done over a length of 5 kilometers 4 times. So the fiber net was also extended from the place of nesting known as Gokharkuda up to Bateshwar temple, which is the last tip of nesting area. Due to regular protection and conservation, unique mass nesting occurred in the last season. That is, there was observed a 24/7 nesting from the first day till the second day. In the first day on 21st March, it started at around 3 a.m. in the wee hours of the in the morning. So then it continued to 24/7 till the night of the second day, that is 22nd of March. People attribute the day and night nesting to lockdown, which initially had started during that period due to COVID-19 pandemic. But scientifically, it is not proven. It can be attributed to one thing, that is, there was no tourist activity during the lockdown, because in the lockdown, it was completely banned to enter into any beach, be it the matter of tourism or be it in the matter of conservation or anything. Only forest department was allowed to manage the turtle exercise in the beaches. You can see we have a very good and developed interpretation center. But however, since Corona pandemic was there, the interpretation center was not visited by anybody. We had also put in place a few police personnel so that no one can enter the nesting area and interpretation center. Signages were placed throughout the road and the places of nesting. Signages for warning the visitors were also there, which were fixed prior to the place of nesting. Effective coordination was maintained with the district administration and the police for management of the visitors. However, the police personnel and our forest personnel did not encounter any visitors due to the Corona pandemic. Then there was a strict implementation of use of red torch light in the mass nesting area for minimizing the disorientation. Generally, what it happens, the turtles are always attracted towards the light. So red torch light will never distract them, and the nesting turtles will never go here and there, and they will stay in the perfect area where the nesting should occur. The total mass nesting and the hatching event was monitored through CCTV surveillance system, and we left no stone unturned to monitor the total process. As I told earlier, you can see a photo in which you can see how the day nesting in the previous year, in the previous season. So in the day nesting, this is a picture in which the number is less. However, one point of time was there that we could not even place our feet within the turtles. They were going on nesting. It was a 24/7 nesting. It is just for all your view that how the nesting took place during afternoon. This is a picture of the afternoon at about 3 p.m. Now let's go to the insight of sea turtle management, how it is done. Now we have few onshore and few offshore activities. Now the onshore activities mainly are restricted to engagement of camp personnel in all the 11 protection camps throughout that 5-kilometer stretch I was referring now, for a period of 7 months. That is from 1st of November to 31st of May. Even it is extended further if there is late hatching of eggs. Due to engagement of the camp personnel, artificial hatcheries are also maintained, since sometimes we may see that the beach erosion is taking place at a higher rate. So what we do, we create artificial hatcheries, and the vulnerable nests are relocated to the artificial hatcheries so that the hatching of the baby olive ridley turtles can take place smoothly. In total of the coast, 8 numbers of artificial hatcheries were maintained, and with due procedure and with involvement of experts and NGOs, CBOs, the hatcheries were maintained in an appropriate manner. There is another system of reporting the olive ridley nesting and mortality. Mortality is a great concern because sometimes the number of mortalities increase due to various external factors. But however, this time the mortality was very less, and it stood around 500 in respect of Rusiculia, about 300 something. I will be sharing. The mortality was less and the nesting was proper. The control room is always given an information that this much amount of nesting and this much number of mortalities have occurred. And another software has been developed by the PCCF Wildlife, in which online real-time reporting is done for the mass nesting and wildlife deaths. The death of turtles are not left as it is. We always go on investigating through due post-mortem what was the reason for the death. The reason for the death is mostly attributed to hit by trawlers or asphyxiation by the trawler net. After due investigation, the turtle bodies are buried deep into the sand to avoid problems of decay and smell, etc. This is a figure of the Google Earth, in which you can see the number of camps, 11 numbers, which are located starting from Prayagi on the northern side to Antaraipur on the southern side. Antaraipur happens to be the border of Andhra Pradesh and Odisha. So the locations of the camps you can very well see. Then you can see the beach profile in the last season. In the last season, how the river mouth and new mouth of Rusiculia have been placed near each other. The broad one is the broad one which opens up into the sea is the actual river mouth. A new mouth also opened up subsequently, and the Rusiculia river drained into the sea through the new mouth also. So now you have some figures in how we manage the hatcheries and how the hatchlings, when they arrive, they are collected and left to the sea. Of the number of camps in, we have total of 4 ranges. The mass nesting activity and the sporadic nesting activity occurs in only 2 of the ranges, that is Khallikot and Barampur. No mass nesting occurs in Barampur range. Only Khallikot range has the mass nesting activity. Khallikot has 6 numbers of camps and Barampur has 5 number of camps, total covering 5 kilometers of the beach, of the total coastline. This another slide in which you can see how we tag up with NGOs and institutions of repute to manage the sea turtle. We take the help of WWF, we take the help of IISC Bangalore, we take the help of NGOs such as Tree Foundation and others, where all the 8 artificial hatcheries are managed. This is a figure of sporadic nesting, and you can see the trend, how the number of sporadic nests went on increasing till 2019-20. However, there was a no nesting time in no mass nesting time in 2017-18, which I will be telling in the next slide. You see, this is just a bar graph of the trend of sporadic nesting. This is a pictographical representation of how the fencing is done and how the beach cleaning is done. This is the manual method of beach cleaning. They are quite involved. We take their help and we engage them as workers in that beach cleaning and also in the fixing of the hexanet. These are a few pictures of our camps and field control rooms and our squad people and community people who are engaged for the conservation of the olive ridley turtles. Now this is a figure of mass nesting that happened in Berhampur division. In the previous years, you can very well see that in the 15-16, there was no mass nesting. Then in the year 2018-19 also, there was no mass nesting. In the year 2017-18, you may see that there was a huge mass nesting. About 4.82 turtles arrived for nesting, and there was a double nesting. Now, what does this double nesting means? This double nesting means that when the hatchlings were emerging, another subsequent nesting occurred during that hatchling emergence in the month of June, May last and June first week. So this was a rare occurrence. Now you can see the mosquito net I was referring to, how it prohibits the turtles to go from one end of the one end of the beach to the landward side. So you can see that the turtles after hatchling and emergence, they will move to the seaward side. And our people, they take buckets and through the help of buckets, they take these hatchlings and safely release them to the sea, because they may be attacked by the predators such as crow and other things. Other animals always go on attacking the hatchlings because the time, early morning 6 a.m. after daybreak, the crows become a great predator for these small ones. Now you can see a picture of the patrolling, sea patrolling that occurs daily 2 times, once in the morning and another time in the night. There are 2 sorties, and each sortie is for around, it takes around 3 or 4 hours. So about 8 to 9 hours we go for patrolling and stay in the sea also sometimes when there is information that some trawlers might come into the waters in the ban zone. The ban zone is around 20 kilometers from the coast. So we allow no fishing in the 20 kilometers of the coast, 20 kilometers area from the sea coast. So this is our sea squad. And coming to the end of the presentation nearly, I will tell about the new initiatives that I am planning for the current season. I am trying to have a drone surveillance and the sensors through IR camera or multispectral camera, whatever the case may be. I will be also taking up the tagging of sea turtles by pattern cut on the carapace or marking to see whether the same turtles are coming each year or other turtles are coming. So this will be a nice exercise, and I will request everybody to cooperate whatever expertise they have. I will request the audience also, because we are not experts, we may take all of your help. So there will also be a satellite tagging or GPS tagging, so that we can monitor where these turtles are actually going after the egg laying. Now I will come to the source of funding. The source of funding for this conservation and management exercise is a centrally sponsored scheme, IDWH, Integrated, and state funds. So thank you very much for your patient listening, and definitely there is a future ahead, because we can go ahead with the plans. Thank you very much. Question please, if any.
Thank you, Mr. Ramalan, for a very informative speech. The efforts taken by the Odisha Forest Department to conserve this olive ridley is commendable, and thank you for a wonderful speech. Is there any question from audience? Okay, I think we'll move on to the next presenters. And
Thank you.
Thank you. So our next presenter is Dr. Karthik Shankar. So Dr. Shankar needs no introduction, but still it gives me immense pleasure to formally introduce Dr. Karthik Shankar. Dr. Karthik Shankar is a faculty at Center for Ecological Science in Indian Institute of Science, Bangalore. He is an ecologist by training and profession. His research, especially, I mean, he has done so much research from various range species in both terrestrial and marine ecosystem. His work on sea turtle deserves special mention through. His exciting research on olive ridleys, leatherbacks, and green turtles has provided crucial insights on the sea turtle ecology, behavior, population dynamics, and conservation. In our troubled waters, conserving sea turtles requires a pragmatic approach that Dr. Shankar will articulate in his talk. Over to Dr. Karthik Shankar. Dr. Karthik Shankar, please.
Yeah, are you able to hear me now?
Yeah, Karthik. Yeah, please go ahead.
All right. And can you see the screen? Is it the slides?
Yeah.
Right.
We could see. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you so much for inviting me. I think it gives me particular pleasure to sort of be part of the session, and I will be sort of touching upon both what Dr. Abhijit Das said, as well as Ms. Amla Naik. Thank you so much for sort of setting the stage for some of the things that I'm going to talk about. Since I often get invited to talk about turtles, but most of the research that I do, which you touched upon, is actually on terrestrial herpetofauna. And to add on to what Abhijit said, I think one of the exciting things about the stage of research that all of us are in is that molecular methods have made it possible for us to discover so many new species. So just in the last 5 or 6 years, from our lab, one of my students, Vijay Kumar, described 9 species of tree frogs. Another student is in the process of describing 9 species of wrinkled frogs or night frogs, Nyctibatrachus species. But perhaps most exciting, last year we described this Astrobatrachus curiciana, which is a single species belonging to this genus, which actually belongs to its own subfamily. So we are still finding some amazing things in the Western Ghats, including agamid lizards, a new genus which we described a couple of years back. We're in the process of describing new species of wine snakes. Many people listening may know the green wine snake, Ahetula nasuta, but it turns out that this is actually comprised of many different species, as Abhijit had talked about microhyla as well. Similarly with pit vipers, and again, not just new species in snakes as well. We're beginning to describe new genera, which just sort of indicates that we have these really deeply divergent, evolutionarily different species that even now today we're discovering in the Western Ghats. I cannot even imagine what we will find if we institute a similar level of inquiry in places like the Eastern Himalayas and say the Andaman Islands. I think one of the things to sort of mention again is that both Abhijit and I are part of the long-term ecological observatories program funded by MOEF, and we are part of the herpetofaunal team. And this gives us an opportunity to work with each other as well as with other collaborators in Northeast and Central India on herpetofaunal monitoring in the long term in the context of climate change. which will help us to make contributions to management related decisions and policy. That with that very sort of brief foray into our work on herpetofauna, which personally is very exciting and is also going in new directions. Let me come back to the subject of sea turtles, which with as I've been long associated with from the time I was a student in Chennai in the late 80s. Now, when I was a student in the late 80s, one of the people that was our mentor, who actually worked very closely with Madras Crocodile Bank and is seen here with a bunch of sea crates draped around his neck as a necklace, was Satish Bhaskar. Now, the interesting thing about Satish was that he was actually an engineering student in the 70s, and people who remember him from them said he spent most of his days running to the beach and swimming in the sea and running back and didn't go to too many classes. Luckily for him, Ram Whitaker had started the snake park as well as turtle walks along the Madras coast. And Ram, being a great inspirer of inspiration for herpetologists around the country, he often people would come and hang out at Snake Park, and he would say, "Hey, do you want to help me out over here? Do you want to clean a snake pit? What do you want to do?" Satish was one of those people, and he said to Satish, we have these projects on snakes and crocodiles. No one's working full time on turtles. Why don't you take this up? So Satish then decided that he would start doing sea turtle surveys around the country. And I tell the story for a reason, which you will see. Satish actually visited first Gulf of Mannar, and then in '79 he planned a trip to Soheli, which is this really remote uninhabited island in Lakshadweep. Now, he had to spend 5 months on his own there during the monsoon because that is when the green turtles nested over there. So a fishing boat dropped him off with a promise to pick him up in September. Now, if you thought that there was no communication because there were no phones or any satellite phones or anything in those days, Satish still managed to get across a letter to his wife. He put it in a bottle. Actually, he did this several times. He put letters in bottles and put some money in it also and threw it from the reef. And eventually, one bottle caught the current, reached Sri Lanka, and actually reached his wife within 24 days, which is quite remarkable even by today's standards. This is the island of Soheli, which we've finally visited in 2015. And just to give the relative amount of effort it must have taken him, even in 2015, it took us several weeks of planning. We had to hire 2 fishing boats, and it took us 6 to 8 hours to reach there. And it was not easy to organize a trip there even 4-5 years back. Now, for him to have planned this trip and stayed there for 5 months on his own, and one more point to add is the fishing boat, which is supposed to pick him up, reached 1 month late, and he finished his surveys and came back. Now, later on, he went to the Andamans and got hooked to the place. And his first report of the entire island says, in the interest of brevity, it will be better to list the areas and islands not surveyed. He lists a few islands, and then he says practically all the remaining coasts in Andaman and Nicobars were visited. So Satish, in a sense, sets up this baseline for the sea turtle work which came later on. Everything that we have done since then has, in a sense, been based on the series of surveys that he did between 1978 and about mid-1990s or so, including one trip to Indonesia, Irian Jaya, which is now known as West Papua, where there is quite an interesting story where the local people who had never seen an outsider thought he was tagging the turtles and then going back to his country and using a giant magnet to attract all the turtles back to his country. In fact, a few years later, when the population declined, they said somebody came from another country and stole all our turtles. Now, following on Satish's work in the Nicobar Islands, the Madras Crocodile Bank set up a monitoring program there in the early 2000s. I, in fact, as a postdoctoral researcher at Wildlife Institute, I worked there in 2001, 2002. And unfortunately, the program which was being maintained subsequently supported by Croc Bank, and I was involved in sort of the monitoring program. In 2004, the tsunami struck. All of the research, a researcher who was working at the site, unfortunately died. Several visiting bird watchers died. All of the forest department camp staff died, and of course, like most of the people along that coast, in fact, were killed. There is one remarkable story. Our field assistant, Agu, who worked with us from 2000 onwards, was swept away to sea. But He, in fact, he tells the story that like he and all the staff were running away, and then the big wave hit, and then he held on to a tree and he somehow managed to hold his breath till he came up. And he was at sea for 9 days, and finally swam back to land when a monitor lizard climbed the branch he was holding on to and started chewing on him. He had several broken bones, but he managed to make it back to land, and he was rescued after 15 or 16 days. Thanks to Agu and Uncle Pao, one of the older Karen community people who was helping Crowdbank with their field surveys from the 70s onwards. In fact, he was a boatman for many of Satish's trips. Uncle Pao and Agu helped us re-establish a camp in Little Andaman Island in 2007. So just 2 years after the tsunami and Agu's traumatic experience, he was back in the field with us. We have been monitoring leatherbacks there since 2008. We have 12 years of monitoring at West Bay, which shows that these populations are stable or increasing. Last year, we recorded the most number of nests at this site, 200 nests. We also have put 10 satellite transmitters on, which shows that these turtles actually treat the Indian Ocean as their swimming pool. So the first 8 turtles that we tagged all went east, and one went all the way to Western Australia, and they went along the coast of Indonesia. And we as biologists, we might have come to the conclusion that, oh, we know what they're doing. They all go eastwards towards Australia, like the legends said. But the last 2 turtles that we tagged decided to prove us wrong, and one went to Mozambique and the other went to Madagascar. So our turtles from Andamans are basically using the entire Indian Ocean for foraging. Very briefly, I just wanted to come back to the basics, and the idea of this saying "so excellent a fish" comes from one of the first acts against killing of turtles and tortoises, which is from the Bermuda Assembly in 1620, and sort of sets the sort of mark for when the earliest sort of conservation law might have come into being for sea turtles globally. Unlike frogs and lizards and snakes and so on, where there's, as Abhijit had said earlier, there are, hundreds and thousands of species. Sea turtles attract a lot of attention, even though there are only 7 species. Leatherbacks belonging to this one family, Dermochelidae, and all the others are the hard-shelled turtles. Of these, 5 of them are globally distributed. And they've long fascinated biologists because of their extremely long cross-oceanic breeding migrations of 10 to 15,000 kilometers. Leatherbacks are known to dive to over 500 meters, sometimes 1,000 meters. Green turtles and hawksbills, green loggerheads and hawksbills are known to hybridize. And of course, one of our favorite species, the ridley, is known for its enormous nesting aggregate of aribadas. And of course, as was mentioned by Mr. Nayak before, they're also known that the hatchlings come back roughly to the same beaches or the same regions to nest again when they are adults. A few pictures of the 4 species that we find in India: leatherbacks, hawksbills. I won't talk much about hawksbills today, or green turtles. Our main green turtle foraging populations are in Lakshadweep, where again IISc and the Action Foundation have a long-term monitoring program for sea turtles, and this complements the work on seagrass and seagrass health that is being done by the Nature Conservation Foundation, another NGO. Both organizations have been working there for over 10 years. The focus now, I'm going to come to olive ridleys. In a bit. As has been mentioned before, one of the things about the challenges of sea turtle conservation has a lot to do with their life cycle. So firstly, they have these long breeding migrations of 1,000 to 10,000 kilometers. So we have to protect them in the foraging ground, we have to protect them in the breeding ground, and we have to protect them in the migratory routes in between. This poses a massive amount of spatial challenges. They mate in offshore waters, so those areas have to be protected, and that was mentioned before, and I will come to it again. Hatchlings nest incubate for about 7 to 8 weeks, but again, here the sex is determined by temperature. Hatchlings emerge, find the sea using light cues, and then follow a pelagic lifestyle for 10 to 15 years, and use the Earth's magnetic field to navigate and find their nesting beaches again. With regard to the temperature in particular, because the higher temperatures produce females and lower temperatures produce males, sex ratio usually varies over the course of a nesting season and also between nesting beaches. However, with climate change, there is likely to be changes in those temperatures at the nesting beach. Towards this, and I will not talk much about this today, but we have been measuring sand and nest temperatures in Rushikulia with the forest department at the hatcheries maintained by them. And then with the we also sex the dead hatchlings. You cannot actually determine the sex of hatchlings of sea turtles in any other way. You have to use the gonad and do histology. So whatever hatchlings die naturally, we collect those, and we have been monitoring the sex ratios of populations over the last 12 years. And we are beginning to see that in many years, because of the increased temperature, that there is nearly 100% female production, which is which is obviously of great concern. The next phase of the important part is that when they emerge, sea finding is visual, and this lighting related disturbance can cause problems. And then, of course, the orientation and navigation, as I mentioned, is primarily by the magnetic field. The history of turtles in Orissa is quite old, or our knowledge of it. Alexander Hamilton, a ship's captain, wrote about it in 1727. So people have known about this, in a sense, have known about it for a long time. But of course, it was not known. It was known to the local community who consumed the eggs, but it was really not known to the scientific community till Robert Bustard, who again was also mentioned today in the Gharial talk, came and did for a crocodile survey and discovered Gharial Mata. A Forest Department research officer, C.S. Carr, who started his PhD with Bustard. His research with Bustard and completed his PhD on olive ridley turtles in Gharial Mata, discovered the Devi rookery in 1982. Unfortunately, there has not been nesting in Devi for over 20 years, 22 or 23 years. Bivash Pandav, a Wildlife Institute biologist, as a young PhD student, discovered the Rishikulia rookery in 94. Now, one of our own work which we did on turtles was that, because olive ridleys are globally distributed, and they have a sister species, the Kemp's ridley, which is found in Mexico, it was long believed that the olive ridley and Kemp's ridley had separated from each other when the two Americas had been separated, or the two oceans had been separated by the joining of the Isthmus of Panama, which connected North and South America. This separated the oceans, and people said, on one side it became olive ridley, on the other side it became Kemp's ridley. But our genetic analysis, which was done through Wildlife Institute of India as a postdoc, showed that the closest relative of Kemp's ridley turtles was actually in Orissa. So the oldest population of olive ridley turtles in the world, evolutionarily, is on the east coast of India, with the largest population, of course, being in Orissa. And what we hypothesized based on our genetic data is that from this population, there was subsequent colonization of Atlantic and Pacific by the Indian Ocean ridley. So in a sense, the ancestral or evolutionary origin of original olive ridley populations are Indian Ocean, and particularly we think on the east coast of India. We also carried out, again with B.C. Chowdhury and Bivash Pandav, Jack Frazier and others, we carried out some initial satellite tracking in the early 2000s, which showed that many olive ridleys stay on the coast of Orissa beyond nesting. But that, of course, some, as was known earlier from tag returns, also travel to the coast of Sri Lanka. Subsequently, a project was carried out with support from DGH by Wildlife Institute and B.C. Chowdhury, confirming these patterns, showing that many of them do in fact travel to the coast of Sri Lanka and Gulf of Mannar. But several of them also remain in the offshore waters of Orissa, except during breeding, they remain within about 5 kilometers. In the non-breeding season, they may well move to 50 to 100 or even 200 kilometers offshore. The most important question that people ask anybody who works with ridleys is, they must be, about how are the turtles going? When are they going to go extinct? Are the populations declining and so on, right? And in the early 2000s, this was very much the trend. We had done some analysis which showed that populations had been declining in recent years. Many years Aribada had failed. There were high levels of mortality. We had also Bivash and others had measured body size, which we showed over multi-year period was actually declining, and we used this to say that the sharp decline in population was imminent. In 2007, we started monitoring the beaches at Rishikulia. Forest Department was monitoring the beaches in Gharial Mata and at some point Wildlife Institute as well, so we did not start a program there. Working closely, every year we worked closely with the Forest Department in Rishikulia, with a combination of their staff as well as ours. And we've been estimating the number of in these Aribadas since 2007. And as you will see that the numbers are sort of like maybe a little different, but minor differences between what Mr. Nayak showed and this, but that is because of the method of calculation. In 2017, of course, there was a second Aribada, which I have not included over here. But broadly, the pattern that I wanted to show is that the nesting size of Aribadas in Rushikulya is increasing. And on the one hand, this is not to say that we should not be concerned about the conservation, but on the other hand, sometimes the knee-jerk reactions that we get from many NGOs and many activists and so on are I would call them they're overhyped, and we do need to worry about the conservation of turtles in Orissa, and there are grave threats to their habitat that can come from ports and development and so on. But at the same time, we should recognize that this is a population that is actually recovering and increasing thanks to the efforts I would say thanks in large part to the efforts of the state in curtailing offshore offshore fishing. Having said that, we also have been conducting these very detailed offshore surveys, which shows that both between and within the season, the main density of nests of the congregation can shift. So, in some sense, working with the department, it would be useful because the entire 20 kilometers into 5 kilometers, 100 square kilometers does not need to be monitored all the time. Just the areas where those turtles are found need to be monitored more intensely. This is also probably true in Gahir Mata, but unfortunately, because we don't have that data, we cannot pinpoint it. But I would suggest that surveys there would show the same thing, and it would actually ease the burden of the department by having to monitor only those really high density areas, which is a much smaller part of the seascape. In between, of course, as you can see here as well, in some years Aribada didn't take place. The following 2008, 18 and 19, I think there was no Aribada, but again 2020 there was a big Aribada, and so I would encourage all people, including the government and everybody, that when one year there is no Aribada, there is no need for everybody to panic. This is how turtles nest. Some years they nest massively, and other years there are just fewer numbers of turtles coming back that year, and so there might not be an Aribada, but it is not an immediate cause for concern. So just a picture of what these massive Aribadas look like. So that's 2013. That night we counted 60,000 turtles on a single night, which is the most we've, I think, recorded on a single night. And this is a bird's eye view of 2015 Aribada, not hatchlings. Those are actually adults, as you can see now. So 2020, we actually would say that Aribadas are occurring at multiple sites on a regular basis and increasing in Rushikulya. Our data on adult breeding sizes suggests they've not declined. Fishery-related mortality has not increased, may have in fact decreased. As a biologist, one of my international mentors, Jack Frazier, would tell me, at no point in time in your life can you call yourself a sea turtle expert. You can be 70 years old and study them for 50 years, but you still, at some level, you have to say, I still don't fully understand these animals. A brief history of sea turtle conservation. Sea turtle, shortly after Buster discovered this site, it coincided with the introduction of mechanization in India, and though turtles were eaten in Calcutta on a very regular basis, and they were caught and shipped over there, many people I've spoken to remembers going to the markets and seeing sea turtles sold over there, herpetologists like Indraneel Das and so on. Now, in the late 70s, because of this mechanization, that number just shot up by tens of thousands. And so some years, same I counted 50 to 80,000 turtles being landed. A remarkable series of events, including the forest department, people like Chandrasekhar Kar, a young herpetologist which died very young, unfortunately, the interest of the Prime Minister at the time, Indira Gandhi, who then brought the forest department and forest and Coast Guard into effect, led to the centralized move to enforce wildlife conservation, and this led to the decline in the take of turtles in the 80s. Now, by the 90s, thanks to incidental catch, as has been mentioned, the turtle mortality started going up again, and by the late 90s, conservation groups and all of us were very, very concerned. But partly the media hype raised by conservation groups, very well-intentioned, however, created this very strong sort of rift between fisher communities and conservationists, and it made turtle conservation this very this bone of contention. And there were very, very strong sort of feelings about it. And the fishermen would say, we are not the enemies of turtles. Why are you making us the enemies of turtles? The local artisanal fishermen, that is. So about 15 years ago, we also started the Odisha Marine Resources Conservation Consortium as an effort to bring fishers, conservationists, and other agencies like the state and everybody together and resolve fishery-related mortality and reduction of bycatch through these methods of dialogue and so on. And those are also things that the Forest Department has been doing as and working with community in Rishikulia and so on. I do want to highlight that coastal development still does pose a major threat because turtles can recover from mortality, but if the habitats disappear, then we lose them forever. The nice thing about turtles is everybody loves turtles. And at the same time that Bustard was starting sea turtle research in Orissa, Romulus Whittaker and others were starting sea turtle monitoring in Tamil Nadu, which is when Satish Bhaskar got involved. They conducted surveys in Tuticorin, but most importantly, they started these turtle walks in Chennai with a hatchery in some friend's backyard to begin with, and then various organizations ran them for like many years. In the last 30 years or so, the Student Sea Turtle Conservation Network, which I'm proud to say that when I was in college, I was part of a group which started it, has been active and still continues to monitor the beaches and rescue turtles. This actually has led to a spate of citizens movements across the country. In every state, there's one or two or three citizens groups that are involved in sea turtle conservation, and these really provide us the mechanism or the hope through which we can aim to save sea turtles throughout the country, but also the habitats that they need. Right, so we've recently set up a group, not recently, for the last 10 years, and every year we try and have a meeting. This year's meeting was actually supported by the Lakshadweep Department of Environment, and we had a national meeting over there, including all of these groups in December 2019. So I want to finish by saying that we all get very obsessed with these animals like sea turtles, and tigers and elephants and so on. But at the end of the day, we must remember that they are only flagships. That we cannot. In Orissa, sometimes in the past, thanks to very passionate conservation groups, I have in fact argued that sometimes they made them into battleships, and by alienating communities from the idea of sea turtle conservation. We have to bring people on board to conserve not just sea turtles, but the habitats that they live in, whether it's coral reefs or fish communities or the larger marine ecosystems. So our goal must really be to use sea turtles as that hook by which we can protect larger marine ecosystems. And with that, I will finish and thank you. And I will leave. I will take any questions if there are. Thank you very much for this opportunity, and I will just sort of mention my book From Soup to Superstar, which I will mention. Really, I spent many years working on that to write this whole history of sea turtle conservation in India, which has involved so many remarkable individuals like Satish Bhaskar and Rom, remarkable NGOs, and of course, involvement of state forest departments in many states around the country. With that, I'll thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Shankar, for excellent presentation. In fact, you have almost highlighted all the aspects of marine turtle conservation in India. And thank you so much. Is there any question to ask from you? In fact, I wanted to ask you, Dr. Shankar.
Sure.
I thought of asking previous presenter, but in fact, this would be appropriate to you. Why do they, all your ridleys, why do they do mass nesting? Is there any biological significance in that?
So the most popular hypothesis right now is that olive ridleys lay quite shallow nests, right, which is susceptible for predation by now these days dogs, but even like monitor lizards, any kind of feral jackals, hyenas, anything that comes on the coast, right? And we find that like other nests, after the first 2-3 days, predators can't detect it, but they can detect ridley nests because they're very shallow. So if you look at solitary nesting along the coast, if you don't put it in a hatchery, 95% of the nests get predated by feral dogs. Right?
Okay.
This is why all state forest departments have hatcheries. But what does it tell us about evolution? That solitary nests of these olive ridleys have been getting predated. But if 100 come or 1,000 come, at a time only so many eggs can be eaten. So it's called predator satiation hypothesis, which protects the eggs also from the thing. And when the hatchlings come out, also millions are going out. So some will get eaten by fish, many will exist. So that is the major hypothesis that has been given.
So the other sister species, which is distributed in other countries, they're also doing mass nesting?
Chemistry, in fact, is known only from one mass nesting population. It is not known from any other population. So the ridleys are known for this mass nesting.
Okay, okay. Thank you, Dr. Shankar. Thank you.
I have a query. I am DF of Barampur, please.
Yes, sir.
Just I would like to listen from you whether there is any logic for this day nesting or there is no logic at all.
Mr. Naik, actually, so Kemp's ridleys have been known to mass nest during the day throughout, they're very well known to mass nest throughout the day. And in a way, like when I said that our olive ridleys are their closest relative, so I would not be surprised with some similarity in behavior. The other thing is that this day mass nesting has been observed in Rishikulia a lot. So the pictures which I showed you from the day are 2013, 2015, and so on. So it's
Right,
like
right.
our memories sometimes are short, and it seems surprising. I basically think that what happens is that when it's a large aribada, when there are lots of turtles waiting to nest, there is some hormonal change which is going on at that time. I don't make it like anthropomorphizing, but it's almost like they're desperate to come and nest at that time. So first night if they come and they're not able to find, next day by the afternoon, by the evening, they're ready to come ashore. Right? So I would say that there is a physiological explanation, but we don't exactly know the details of that physiology. But it is
What
I
about this
don't think it is
second
related
time
to
nesting?
lockdown or anything.
So second time nesting during June, is there any logic?
So again, I think it has to do with the critical mass. That is, if the population is large, if it's small, many of them may come and have a second nesting solitarily, right? Now, the second mass nesting has been observed in Gahir Mata 2 or 3 times, and in Rishikulia only in the recent years, right? So I kind of suspect it has something to do with the population size. So in fact, when there's a second mass nesting, the other possibility is that they are not finding suitable areas to nest in Gahir Mata, so they are nesting second time in Rishikulia. That is also possible.
Thank you so much.
I cannot, give you definite answers about these questions.
Right, right.
And I wanted to say, Mr. Nayak, that we've been working now, both ISC and Dakshin been working there since 2007 very closely with Forest Department. And our policy has been any help which you need, any collaboration, any guidance, any support. We are always available for that. And I very much hope we can continue those conversations with you as well.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Shankar. So we have come to the end of the session. So all the presentation was very impressive today and very informative. So what we come to know from all the presentations, the habitat conservation, that is most important for this species, especially ecosystem aspect. So that is the most important in this conservation of herpetofauna. So I'm not going to talk much about details about the presentation, because the presentation given by the stalwarts in their subject. So I would like to thank all the speakers, Dr. Abhijit Das, Dr. Samir Sinha, Sri Amlan Nayak, and Dr. Karthik Shankar for giving your valuable time for us. And also I would like to thank people who are connected with us through direct link, YouTube, webcasting, and Twitter and Instagram. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, sir.